Welcome everyone to our member deep dive. We're so excited to have you here, and thank you, Kathy, for that beautiful prayer that focused on service and what we want to talk about tonight. Our guest tonight is a little bit of a celebrity to the people on this call, whether she wants to be or not. She's probably a reluctant celebrity. But so I'm not going to do an enormous bio because I want to spend the time hearing from her. But Sharon Eubank is currently the director of humanitarian services for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and is the author of a new book called Doing Small Things with Great Love: How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. And for us here at MWEG, this book felt particularly timely because this is an organization of a group of women who are doing their level best to add the tiny little mite that each of them have into the world that at a point in time that sometimes feels quite difficult. And we felt that Sharon had a lot to share with us today about how those small things can be amplified together to be great, and how love and how our personal hearts can play a really important role in making that work meaningful and also making it impactful. So welcome, Sharon. We are just so delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a treat for me to be with all of you, and I can't believe, looking in the chat, all the places that you come from. So thanks for caring about this topic and inviting me.
Well, we're so delighted to have you. So I want to open this topic by getting into your head a little. You tell a lot of personal stories in this book. Some of them are just so extraordinarily beautiful, and it just is a rich testament to a life well lived. But a book is a different thing. It's an act of discipline. It's an act of sacrifice. It's you giving a gift to the world of your heart and your mind, sort of revealing some about yourself and your perspective. And I know that to do it, you had to carve a lot of time and energy out of what is an extraordinarily crowded life, to write and then to share. Sharon was just telling us as we got on the call that she has basically a chat about this book most days until the end of February. So the question I guess I have is, what need did you see out in the world? You see a lot of different kinds of need, temporal ones that you meet, but what need did you see out in the world that you hope this particular book would meet? It's a different kind of need, I think.
It's a really perceptive question. And, a lot of people call me up on the phone. They want to serve a mission, or they love humanitarian work and they want to get involved. But the conversation that I have over and over with people is the reason that I wrote this book. And it is that we think that needs are far away, and we think that the answer is going to be something exotic. And neither
Mm.
one of those things is true. The greatest needs that any of us respond to, including me, that I live, right here in North Salt Lake, are the things that are happening right here. I see on the news a photograph of, someplace in Ukraine or Gaza that has been bombed, and my heart just goes out to the people there.
Mhm.
And it was a recognition that there are people whose interiors have been bombed out like that, and they're right across my yard. They are
Mhm.
right where I'm walking my dog. They're in the clubhouse where I, go exercise. There are people all around me, and if I can recognize that my most powerful acts are in the place where I live, I have a lot more opportunities than maybe going someplace far away once a year. That was the question and the response that I tried to give in 10 different chapters, about why this might be true. Because intellectually we know it's true, but we don't feel it in our gut. In our gut,
Yeah.
I still know that they need me in Somalia more than they need me in Salt Lake. And
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think? Because the the response is sincere. It's like, I see God's children hurting. I want to help them. Why is it harder to see when it is next door or familiar and less exotic?
It's a good question that we could maybe ask ourselves. Part of the answer, I think, comes from it looks so simple to us. We are presented with a problem that is far away, and the complexity of it has been stripped out. We're just seeing one thing.
Yeah.
Where the place where I live, I know all the complexities. I know why that neighbor isn't speaking to that neighbor, and what happened 20 years ago. And so
Yeah.
all of that context gets in there, and it feels messier. Well, I can't really do anything about that. But people who need socks in, Somalia, there's a problem I
Yeah.
can solve. And so it seems simple to us, and we gravitate toward those things.
I think sometimes it allows us to help situations that we also don't have any real responsibility for creating or solving, right? And sometimes when they're closer to home, it's just a little bit more difficult because it requires us to say, okay, what played into this? Maybe I have more control over this than I think. I don't know. I'm just so fascinated by why we as people do that, because I 100% know I do. I I hear about a thing, I hear about a need, and I think, oh my gosh, someone should solve that. Let's get this food to that place. And the people living in houses two doors down could be starving, and I might not know it,
Yeah.
right? And but it just seems easier. I don't know. So
I tell a story in this book that really changed my own opinion. It was in 2022, and I moved into a new house, and I went to Relief Society, and I was speaking in Relief Society, and somebody had their phone and they were recording me. And I thought, oh my gosh, why are they recording me? And so I sat down next to the woman and I said, what are you going to do with that recording? And she said, oh, our friend Janet Hatch is bedridden and she can't leave, but she wants to participate. So I'm just, I'm FaceTiming her on
yeah.
this. And she were doing that. So I thought, well, I'll go visit Janet. I'm brand new in this word. I'll go visit her. And what I realized was, and I wrote about her in the book, she had a failed back surgery. And so instead of solving the pain that she had, it made it 10 times more intense. So she has all of this pain just coursing through her body. And she said it was so bad she thought she would die after the first year. And this was 9 years ago. So she's in a recliner. She can't stand, she can't move. And yet she's trying to figure out, I'm still alive. What should I do? And she wanted to type these books for her family. She had all this family history in her mind, but she couldn't type on her iPad. It was just too difficult. She only had 15 minutes a day where she could use the iPad, where she had enough strength. And she was feeling so sorry for herself. And she tried to get people to come help her, and they didn't come when she could come. And she tried a voice app, and her voice wasn't strong enough. And finally, the spirit said right inside her head, just try, see what you can do in 15 minutes. So when I went over to visit her, she told me this story. And then she said, look at my coffee table. And she had 25 books that she had written in 15-minute increments. And I realized she's giving her family such a gift because she only has that short window of time where she can do something, and she's choosing them in her 15 minutes. And she wrote 25 books. And then in the time that I lived in that house, she passed away. She had written a book for her child that was yet to be born, her grandchild, and that was the last one that she had to do, and then she passed away. And I still think about her. She was a first grade teacher. She taught kids to read for her whole career. When she was in the care center, one of the nurses was like, you were my teacher. They came and throw their arms around her. And the impact that she's having, even after her death, is because she focused on people who were in her circle and she gave it 15 minutes a day. And I thought, okay, I don't need something far away. I don't need something exotic. Janet Hatch is the example to me of what I can do if I just give 15 minutes a day to something that's close to me.
So how did that change Janet? I mean, did it change? Do you feel like, from what you know of her, did it change also her pain or how she experienced pain, to go from having a feeling like there was no way for her to contribute to feeling like there was a way for her to contribute? I don't know. Maybe you don't know that about her, but I think small acts on our own part can also have a tremendous effect on our own psyche, right? If we're just willing to make them.
I think that's true. I think if you ask Janet, she would say her pain levels didn't go down, but it felt like redeeming pain. She was using
Yeah.
it for something. It wasn't just for nothing. And I think she felt a real spiritual sacrifice in the pain that she went through in order to do those things for people she loved.
I love that. Okay, so in the introduction of your book, there was a sentence that just grabbed me. And you said, what makes assistance valuable is when the right thing is delivered at the right time. So big humanitarian organizations use metrics and data to figure out what that is. What's the right thing? How do we deliver it at the right time? If they're vaccines, just whatever it is, there's got to be a way to get it to the right people at the right time. And I'm sure that humanitarian services at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Saints doesn't just operate on vibes, right? So, but I'm interested in how we can apply that same principle of making assistance valuable, doing the right thing at the right time when we do small things with great love. Because for many of us, those acts aren't data driven, right? Like I don't necessarily know what's in someone's cupboard. I don't actually have an internal look into their souls and how they're suffering. But I'm wondering if you could share with the women on this call, just from your lived experience, either yourself or in some of the people, the examples that you've seen, what are some of the spiritual practices or deeply human approaches to moving through the world that help us figure out those two things, figure out what is both the right thing and what is the right time? If I might not necessarily be able to get that information tangibly, but how can I get that information through the spirit or other ways so that I know that I am responding with the right thing at the right time?
Years ago, I owned a toy store, and the toy store was so small that I did my inventory by walking around and thinking, oh, that thing is gone off the shelf. I know what that thing is. And then I would write things down. And when the store got too big, I couldn't do the inventory that way. I couldn't remember what was there. And then I had to turn to a data-driven approach where, I had barcodes and things like that. And
I'm
yet,
going to interject to say it was a very good toy store. I loved that store.
I still miss my toy store. But I think in a lot of ways, data, we use data because we can no longer sit exactly with the people themselves. We're a little bit removed from that. And so we're using data as a replacement. But for me, the premier humanitarian skill is the ability to listen, to sit with somebody and to not impose my opinion about what it is that I think they need, but to ask them, what is it that's going on? And what do you want other people to do for you? And then ask a bunch of questions around that so that I fully understand what it is they're asking for. We think that the premier skill is gathering money or resources,
Mm-hmm.
or, shipping things. The most important skill you can have as a humanitarian is the ability to listen to what's really going on. So politicians will have listening tours, faith ministers, faith leaders, they do ministering. Neighbors walk with each other. My sisters have a Marco Polo, we talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The ability to listen with an open heart and then respond to the thing that was asked for is the most important thing.
And how do you think we can develop that?
Well, it's a spiritual gift. And I hesitate telling a story because it's important to me, but on the night of the 26th after Christmas, I woke up about 1:30 in the morning and I could not sleep. And I started thinking about President Holland, and I knew he had been in the hospital, and I just started thinking about all the things that I had learned from him. And so I woke up and I started typing on my computer, typing down memories that I had about him. And I thought, if he ends up passing away, I'm going to save this. I'm going to make it as a tribute. I did that until about 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I sent it off to the woman who works on my social media. And I said, don't do anything with this, but let's just keep it in case there's a need for this, and then we'll use it. That was around 4. Around 4:50, the announcement came out from the church that he had passed away at 3:15. I had no way of knowing about that, but the Holy Ghost woke me up, and I felt like I watched with him for the last hours, that he was on the earth, remembering things about him. That was really sacred and special to me. I not pretend that I can do that all the time, but when the Holy Ghost wakes me up with something and says, listen to this, listen to me, or when I read something like you said and it grabs me and I think, ooh, there's something important about that. Those are also the ability to listen to what is being spoken or unspoken that's important, and then finding a way to respond. And I think that's one of the most important skills that we can practice in our communities, in our families, with the Father, is the ability to listen and then say, I will respond to the thing that is asked of me.
So talk to me. You This is just such a lovely story, and it tells how the Spirit could talk to you and how through the Spirit you could bear witness in this very critical moment of his passing to his worth and what he had contributed. It also prepared you to share that beautiful story. I mean, those stories are tender. They were one of the first things I saw on Instagram. You posted the first one, and then, like everyone else, I was waiting. I'm like, where's the next one? I want the next one. When's the next one going to come? Um, and I guess my question is that, but all of those things only happened because you had a relation with him. You'd had experiences. I couldn't magic those stories up because I didn't have that relationship with President Holland. I had a much more distant one. So talk to me about the value and importance of just being with people. How can this is becoming so increasingly challenging for humans now, for whatever reason. They do not want to be with one another. And And how can we better practice that as children of God, practice being with one another so that we can listen, so that we can know each other's stories and experiences?
I think one of the premises of Mormon Women for Ethical Government is this idea that we don't have to agree to be able to have relationships with people. And that has been true, over a long period of time, but there's something about the culture that we're living through right now that it's super easy to cancel people. You don't believe the same things that I do, or our politics are different, or our faith is different, or our orientations are different. Whatever these,
Mhm.
these differences are, we act as if it's it's unbridgeable, that somehow I can't.
Insurmountable. Hmm.
Yeah. And so at any given point, you and I don't agree on 50,000 things, but there's probably 18,000 things that we do agree upon. And
Yeah,
it's that ability to be able to say our relationship doesn't depend that we agree on everything. I think
yeah.
Joseph Smith was one of the best practices of this. He would friendly talk to the mob that had tried to tar and feather him the night before, and answer their questions about doctrinal things. He was willing to stay open to people, even though they didn't agree on lots of different things. And I think for us, worried about ethical government, ethical, equitable places for people to thrive, we have to practice that skill. It doesn't matter that we don't agree on these kinds of things. And I spoke at the when I spoke at the MWEG conference, I told the stories about Al Simpson, who was the senator from Wyoming that I had worked for, and
Mhm.
how good he was, even making it funny about, yep, I am totally diametrically opposed to Ted Kennedy, and we do a radio program together.
Yeah.
These kinds of things where let's mix it up, let's talk, but I still respect you. We're still friends. Our relationship doesn't depend on this. And I think you're right. We respond when we have relationships with people, and we could be better at strengthening relationships with people we don't fully agree with.
So this feels to me like a really important role that people of faith can and should play in this moment, because I don't know that uh, it feels to me that this the part of this title that relates to this so specifically, I think, is this idea of great love. Great love is something that can come forth spontaneously when you really like someone or they're good to you, or, there are lots of reasons we feel great love spontaneously. But the kind of love that I think you're asking us to practice is not necessarily spontaneous, right? It's something that's a learned behavior. It's a discipline. Um, can you talk to me about in your own life how you filled that reservoir of love? What have you done to train yourself? Because I'm going to assume you're human. I'm going to assume there are people that sometimes you don't like or that they irritate you or whatever. That might not be true. But how have you trained yourself to practice that kind of great love? What brings that out of you?
Well, I'm not any better at this than other
I
people.
know. And I will actually allow you to stipulate that, because I think that's true. It's really important for all of us to know that this is a practice, right?
But I gave the book this name that comes from a Mother Teresa quote, and she says, we can't all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love." And I think about the spiritual practice that she did as a Carmelite nun. So she's working in those slums in India, and she's working with people who are dying. They're actively dying. And she brings them into the place where she had, and she would wash the filth off of their feet. She would bathe them. She would put her hands on people's bodies that often hadn't been touched in a long time. She would tuck them into clean sheets. She would help them, write the letters that they wanted to write and hold their hand until they died. And there was very little about those people's physical appearance, or that was lovable. It was unpleasant. It was messy. But her whole thing, when you read her writings, is she was trying to channel the love that she felt for God through herself to another person. It was completely tied to the love she felt for God, and she was trying to be a beacon of that love to those people in their very last moments. And something about that was really transformative to me. It doesn't matter how you're behaving. You're behaving badly, and I can recognize that. But it's like a screen door. As I look through, I see all the metal mesh. I see all of the stuff that you're doing that I don't agree with. But I can look through that and see who you really are. You're a child of God. You're a person who experiences fear. You've had horrible things happen to you that shouldn't have happened to you. And I can be a conduit for love if I can't do anything else? And it's so easy to say that when we're on a little call like this.
Yeah.
It's so hard to practice. And I'm practicing it with members in my family right now that are, it's challenging for them. It's challenging for me. We're trying to meet in the middle, and we don't always before. But it's a redemptive kind of practice. It redeems us from the messiness of our lives when we try.
So one of the pushbacks that we sometimes get universally at MWEG is, we'll take positions, and oftentimes, specifically in some of the policy positions that we're taking, we really are trying to do that from a place of care, right? Like we want to care for other people. And sometimes some of the pushback we get is, oh, that's naive, or you're facilitating bad behavior, and I'm being general on purpose because I don't want us to get caught up in the specifics. But what would you say to people? How would you encourage them? Do you feel like practicing great love is a block to standing up for what's right? In other words, how can we love people who we disagree with and still advocate for truth and not be wishy-washy on what's right or wrong, but still be advocating in ways that are loving?
I think the greatest pattern that we can follow is the New Testament, because you will see Jesus actively projecting great love. When people were in his presence, they felt accepted and loved and seen in a way that they hadn't before. And yet he was not wishy-washy. He wasn't pulling those punches. He was
Mhm.
standing up for what was true. And it felt like he was doing it because he loved them. And if we're looking for any kind of a pattern, those four books in the Gospels, and to a different extent what's in Third Nephi, the way he projected love and acceptance, and then the ability to move people to a higher plane because of that love, I think is the very key. And I wrote about Pamela Atkinson in the book because she's a politician in my home state of
Yeah.
Utah. But her whole goal is to say, I feel differently than you do about that. Tell me more. She's willing to engage with people and say, I don't agree with that. This is what my experience has led me to, but I want to understand what your experience is. And she gets people to talk. And there's nobody who can call her naive. And she's accomplished a lot of things in a culture where she doesn't belong to the dominant religion, doesn't belong to the dominant party all of the time. But she has just been tremendously effective because she loves people, and then she gets them to share with her, and she works. It works.
Okay, so I feel like there's this theme emerging. We need to listen. We need to love. We need to definitely have our own values and hold true to those, but that doesn't mean we, push people out because of our values necessarily. Um, and all of those things sort of lead me to a question that another just sentence in your book that grabbed me, probably because I felt convicted. I'm like, oh, I probably need to learn that lesson. Where you said basically was, quote, my solution to your problem will always be wrong. And that was super humbling, right? And read the wrong way, that could be a disempowering sentence. It could say, oh no, don't even try because you're always going to be wrong. You don't know how to fix someone else's problem. But as I read more, I realized that was the start of an invitation, right? That it was an invitation to come into service and to do all the things we've talked about, to listen, to love, to care. So talk to us a little bit about why that is, why internalizing that concept that we need to start from a place of assuming that our solution for someone else is wrong can help us actually be much more loving and impactful in our service.
If you've read the book, you know where this came from. I worked with
Yeah,
when I was a brand new director in humanitarian services. There was a man who had worked at the church for 37 years, and he was sort of my right hand guy. And I
yeah,
know that he was just like, oh, I can't believe they picked her, to be this. But he and I would have a little meeting in the morning, and we would sit down and we kind of go through the day. And I would turn to Patrick and I would say, in
yeah.
my desire to be a good leader and, still being green and new, what do you think I should do? And he would never answer my question. He would say, my solution to your problem will always be wrong. And I was frustrated with him. It's that I'm new and you've done this a long time. Help me. but he understood something that I didn't understand. He wasn't trying to answer the question that I had. He was trying to give me the respect and the trust in myself as a leader that I'd be able to do it. So what he would do instead was he would say, "What do you think you should do?" And so I'd spit something out. He'd said, "All right, if you do that and this other thing happens, what will you do to mitigate that? All right, in the middle of mitigation, what about this other thing that we haven't talked about yet?" He would walk me through this decision tree until I
Yeah.
realized, okay, we've covered all the bases, and now I'm going to make a decision. And then if it was wrong, Patrick helped me fix it. But what he ended up giving me instead of the answer to a problem was the trust in myself to be able to, I know I can do this. I can walk through this. And sometimes we're so focused on the problem that the person has. You need a thing or you need something
Mhm.
built, or that we solve that problem, but we don't ever show them the respect of trusting them and allowing them to rise up to the occasion and be that leader. And that's way more important than the others, because I think by solving people's problems, we turn them into victims. We just say, you can't do this without me, and I'm the one that you need.
Yeah.
And why would we ever want that to be the solution? So I'm really grateful that Patrick taught me that.
So I'm going to tell you, this is again a divergence, but as I was reading that and I was thinking about it, and Patrick and the role he played, I really was reflecting on that in terms of personal prayer. And I was thinking about how sometimes I go to God and I want him to give me an answer, even an answer about what good thing I should do. And in some ways, not that God is all knowing, he knows all good, he wants all the good things for us. Our Heavenly Father loves us with everything in him. So I don't want to say his answer, his solution would always be wrong, but his solution would be wrong in the sense that it would defy the plan that has me needing to figure that out for myself. Does that make sense? And so, how can we ourselves have the courage when we are wanting to serve as women? I think often we feel like if we can't do something perfectly, we shouldn't do it at all. We risk making mistakes, we shouldn't try. How can we risk being wrong and trying things and knowing that that will still all work together for the good of those who love God?
I think a sisterhood is a lot like my relationship with Patrick.
Yeah,
It gives me, if I have women around me that give me the permission to say, this may or may not work out, but let's try it and I'll help you
yeah.
and see what's going to happen. There's something about that sisterly support that gives me confidence to be able to do things that may be wrong, may turn out to be wrong. So I think we can give that to each other. It's one of the kindest things we can do for each other. I was at a book group last night, and the women there's about 25 women. They said, we never gather. We don't have natural things in our lives anymore where we come together. The book club is the only thing that we have to do that for. And we feel so supported. We are just bonded to these 25 other women that come to this group because we're there for each other. And we don't just talk about the book, we talk about all these other things because they're creating that sisterly bond that says, try it. Have the confidence. If it doesn't work out, we'll think of something else, and nobody's going to judge you harshly for this thing. We're your people, and we'll help you with that. And I think we need way more of that in our culture than we have.
I couldn't agree more. And so let's take a few minutes and talk about fun. I loved the fact that you included this in the book. And it's really easy to think that service and being a humanitarian, this is this great I think we have the Mother Teresa model in our head, right? Like I'm going to bathe the feet, and that doesn't sound fun to me. I'm going to be honest. It sounds very noble. It sounds very Christ-like. It sounds good. Does not sound fun. So I love that you gave us permission to find some joy in this work. Can you either share some stories with us or tell us why? That felt to me a little counterintuitive, and I was delighted by it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How can we find fun, and why is it important
I
in the
have
work?
a really good friend who used to work at Huntsman Cancer Institute, and she said the pharmaceutical reps were shameless about bringing treats to these different meetings to talk about drugs. And she said, and it worked every time. A doctor is never going to come to that meeting, but oh, there's donuts. Yes, I'll be there. And
Yes, I'll be there.
yeah, and she said it's crass, but it's so true that we respond to food. Food improves everything. And I went
Yeah.
to a lot of length in the book to talk about my friend Gustavo, who loved to cook. He's from Guatemala and he made food for everything. And I still have a book full of recipes that I got from Gustavo because when I look back on all of those events, it was so fun. He made everything fun and the food was a big part of that. Now, he also was funny. You know, he used humor and food as sort of weapons in both hands to sort of weave. I just mixed really bad metaphors, but he made everything more fun because he brought the food and because he made us laugh. And the people who can do that, it's such a gift.
Yeah.
And we need that because I'm just like what you said. I'm so earnest about everything that I'm doing, and I
Mm.
strip the fun out of it. And I wrote about sports and music and bowling and taking people with us and volunteering and food. All of those things bring the enjoyment along with the thing that we're trying to get done. And I cannot forget the example of the Yazidi women that I met who had been taken by ISIS into sexual slavery, and then they had been rescued. And they got together and they formed a choir. So I heard them perform in England, and I put in the book the little QR code that you can listen to them because they found so much consolation and togetherness of singing in that choir to try and heal from what they had been through. And they just loved it. I mean, anybody who asked them, they talk about the choir and what it meant for them. And I think all of us have certain specific things in our lives that we respond to, we like, that feel good to us. And when we leverage those things to do good in a different way, whether it's politics or community or family or whatever it is, the combination of things is 10 times more powerful than the thing on its own.
So I I also kind of want to bring us full circle back to what you were talking about. The example you just gave is a perfect example of something that is a little bit extreme. These are women who had suffered the thing that I think is some of the most extremely unimaginable pain, right? And yet they have this group. So I now imagine myself, Jen Thomas, oh, I would like to start a singing group for Yazidi women who struggled with sexual abuse. And I think, oh, it can be noble and I can help with that. And that sounds good and big. Um, how does that hold true in our neighborhoods? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, would you advise the people on this call that by bringing fun into the lives of people around them, they are actually serving in some way, that they are doing the work of humanitarian service? Because I think sometimes, I know that sounds a little silly, but I think so many people are lonely and they're disconnected and they're sad and they don't necessarily want to be treated as a project. They might just want to be brought joy, right? Is there value in that? And I don't know, maybe there is, maybe I'm answering my question, but I'd love your thoughts.
I mean, we don't even have to ask that question because we
Yeah,
all know how we ourselves respond. If someone invites us to be part of a choir or to go play pickleball or any of those things that are fun, we feel the connection, the
yeah,
loneliness abates, and for sure there's good in that. I think that is one of the answers for our times, the people who can do that. I also believe in the tipping point that women create when they get involved in these things. I was meeting with a different group and they're completely passionate about the reading scores in third graders in Salt Lake City. And
yeah,
they were just a women's group who said, we can do something about this. This is something we care about, and we're going to go. And so they meet, they have food, they talk, but they are focused on this issue, and they're making a huge difference in the school districts here. And so I just love the ability for us to have a great time, bond,
yeah,
connect, but we also pick an issue that we are working on, and it brings us satisfaction and joy the way it did for Janet Hatch and anything else.
yeah.
We're making progress for other people on something.
And probably making progress for the women in that group, just bringing joy to their lives and, sustaining. I think it sustains our ability to do good also when we have joy and fun. So I have a little bit of a hard question for you. It is simply that I was just on a call earlier today that was talking about some public polling research that basically told us that the vast majority of Americans, so a pretty significant majority of Americans, are deeply dissatisfied with what I will call the state of affairs. And that doesn't mean that runs across like partisanship. That isn't like some one group is disaffected and the other one feels like everything's great. They're just, most Americans are pretty disaffected with the state of affairs and they don't agree with what's gone wrong. But the majority of the people do not feel like they're winning and they feel like our society's on the wrong track and isn't thriving. But to me, what was worse, I think that what was most discouraging about that call was that they report feeling that there is nothing that they can do about it. Mm. And so what they feel is sad and feel like things aren't good. But what's super tragic to me is they feel disempowered, right? They don't feel like they have any agency around fixing that. And the women on this call are here because even on their very worst days, and sometimes there are hard days, they don't want to believe that. That the lie isn't that things are bad. Sometimes that's a lie, but the real lie is that nothing can be done about it, right? That we all just need to toss our hands up and say, well, nothing to be done here. And they don't want to give up their agency to act for good. So what I want you to do is to be our best book club member, our best friend, and I want you to give us your best pep talk. I want you to tell us from your experience, having seen some hard things, right? Because your work takes you into places where you can see hard things. And you might, with humanitarian services, you have this rich, I'm sure, deep joy of being able to bring some solutions to people, but in most cases, they're partial solutions. You know, you're not fixing everything. So how do you keep joy? Give us your pep talk. Like, how do you keep your hope and how can we retain the hope that we need to continue to do the small things and believe that those small things make a difference?
So I'm going to answer this in a couple ways. Hopefully it will be peppy enough. I have a lot of mental anguish for the things that are happening in the world that I cannot do anything about. And you know, lots of my work, there are lots of things that I can do things about, and there are other things that I can soften. But for the things that I cannot do anything about right now, no matter what kind of resources I have on behalf of the church or anything else, there are just situations that I cannot address and change. And I've thought a lot about how that weighs me down and how it feels disempowering. And after a while, you think, well, I'm not even going to try because I can't do anything about the things that are the most important. I cannot stop war. I cannot affect, you know, regime change, you know, some of these things that are out there. And yet it's fed to us through the news channels and the things that we watch and participate in all the time. I wrote about this in the book, but I was in Israel right before October, the attack in Israel, 2024. Is it 24 or 23?
It's 23.
Yeah. So this would have been July, right before that, October. And as part of that, I went over to the West Bank in Bethlehem and I visited a place called the Milk Grotto. And there was a nun there, a series of nuns who they pray at an altar 24/7 for peace. So they're just praying for peace, this Catholic order. And it was interesting to listen to the people by me because we just walked by the window where she was praying. And I took a picture of her, and she's wearing a long habit, and it's a very formal order of nuns. And some of the people were like, "What good does that do? I mean, she sits there all day long in an air-conditioned place. You know what good is that going to do to bring peace?" And I thought a lot about her when I got home. But if we are true Christians, if we actually believe in the power of prayer, when we come up against something that we can do nothing about, and we get down on our knees in a very formal way, like that nun did, and we reach out to the most powerful being in the universe and say, I believe in you. I have faith that you can act, and I'm asking you to act in something that I cannot do. And I know it will take a long time. It may not be the immediate answer that I want, but I'm putting my trust in you. I believe in that. I believe in that scripture out of James that says that the powerful prayer of a righteous person avails. It avails much. And there's something about praying really specifically about things that I cannot do anything about that takes away that hopelessness from me. It at least empowers me that at least God and I are doing something about it and he's got the reins, but I'm trusting in him. I'm putting my hand with his. That's been very helpful emotionally and spiritually for me to take those issues to the Lord and have a big chat about it and say, I'm exercising my agency and my faith in you to be able to do something when I can't do something.
And expressing, to me, that feels like also an expression of faith that our Heavenly Father cares, right? That He's aware, and also an expression of faith and hope that things can and will change, and that we're willing to sit with patience, but also I think with the doing of it, right? To me, that's an important thing too, is I've got to always find something to do, but it might not be a big thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be able to change the whole thing. We've got some fantastic questions that, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a little bit, a few of these. So, one thing that is just lovely. It's a question I think about, the limits of empathy. She basically says, "How do you connect emotionally without being overwhelmed by the plight you see others in?"
I don't know that I can fully answer that question. I mean, all of us wrestle with that. I told that story about the panhandlers that sit around my office, and how, just out of protection, I'm not
Mhm.
engaging with them. And
Yeah,
all
yeah,
she really wanted was for me to know her name and to say hi to her every
yeah.
day. She wasn't asking for money for me. She just wanted an acknowledgement of that.
Acknowledgement. Yeah,
And I think we have to be aware. Sister Patricia Holland told me, she said, I plant my relationships in different size pots. And there's nothing bad about that. Sometimes we put things in a small pot because that's the emotional energy that we have to grow that plant. And other plants I've got, I've got a giant field, like the church farms that we're nurturing and navigating.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with recognizing our abilities to, we have to husband that emotional energy. You just do, because otherwise you burn out and you can't take care of anything.
Yeah.
And, and that's a difficult thing. So I try to make sure that I've chosen that the things that I planted were on purpose, that I want that plant in that size pot. Because when I make a mistake, or I make a judgment, then my values get out of whack, and I'm not putting the energy into the things that I care the most about, or that are my stewardships. So
So I'm going to add something that helps me a little bit, and it's back to your concept of prayer. I feel very guilty if I feel like my prayers are, "Here's a problem I would like you to solve. Here's a problem I see it, you should solve it." But there are things that I do feel, and it's a version of, I think, what you just said earlier, that it's okay if I look at the Lord and say, "I am doing absolutely my level best. I have to hand this person or this concern to you and trust that, and pray on behalf of that person that you'll find a way to meet it. But I've reached my limits in my ability to kind of create it." And so that's one thing that has helped me a little bit. It's not, I promise I'm not saying I'll just pray to Heavenly Father and abdicate my responsibility and step out, but knowing that sometimes there are limits, and that's the best thing I can do, is plead, that these needs will be met somewhere and somehow.
and then that ability to listen again, and when it's time for me to
Yeah.
engage, I will re-engage. I'm a person
Back
of,
in.
and
Yeah.
if you tell me, I will pay attention and re-engage again.
I will, and or give me something specific, because that's the other thing. I do kind of tend to respond sometimes to generalized pain, and it's overwhelming. But I have found that one of the ways that my prayers are most effective, when I'm like, "Could you help me to see one specific thing I could do?" Rather than just, I can't engage with all of this because I want to shut down. So using the Spirit and that relationship through prayer to help me find the thing that I could not have found on my own, right, has been really helpful, I think. Okay. Um, I've got a couple versions of this same question, but I want to ask one that I think is tender, and I'd like us to answer it. I want to get involved with others. I did a service mission and that helped, but I have extreme social anxiety. And so being with people for very long exhausts me. And it seems like sometimes, by definition, the very definition of humanitarian work is being with humans. And sometimes, for various reasons, that's hard. So what advice could you give to this person? Like, how can she serve with her whole heart without, you know, knowing her limits with the people, right?
I, being an introvert myself, I have respect for those limits. There's no way I can answer that question, but I also know that a lot of good gets done that isn't face to face. And for people who have social anxiety, there are lots of things that you creatively can find that you can be effective with people on terms that work for you. that
Yeah.
you don't have to put yourself up in a speaking box or working face to face with people all the time. I think there's lots of opportunities, and it comes down to praying to see those opportunities. Show me where they are and what I can do. One of the places that you can start is on Just Serve. I recognize Just Serve is only as good as the opportunities that are in your area. But the fact that if you found opportunities and put them on Just Serve and tried to attract other people, that is a behind the scenes role that would be incredibly powerful because it has such a pond rippling effect to be able to do things like that. So I just encourage you, find things that are comfortable enough for you that allow other people to serve and so that you can do it at scale.
I heard recently about a service that I thought was so amazing that blind people can FaceTime. You can sign up to be a participant in a system where a blind person can FaceTime you and then use their camera to have you be their eyes to read something for them or and I thought that is like something I would love to do, but I couldn't do. I would be a fake person because I have meetings a lot of the time or I have schedules. I wouldn't be able to answer the phone. But this seems to me like something that would be deeply valuable work that someone could do who and what their sacrifice could be. No, I'm willing to stop and I'm able to stop what I'm doing to meet this person's need, right? Whether you're in face to face. So I have a lot of belief that there's those things are possible, right? That we can help people without necessarily being right with them. Okay, we've got a lot of questions, and your answer might be Just Serve, but we've got a lot of people asking how they can help with the church's humanitarian work, whether it's in Utah or that local people can engage with you in pressing projects.
So I think a lot of what we've been talking about is the humanitarian work of the church. The culture that we live in, particularly right now in the United States, is very polarized. And one of the great missions of humanitarian work is to break down polarization and to build bridges. Whatever you can do with your talents in your community where you are to do those things, whatever issues are most important to you and your neighbors, those are the things that further the humanitarian work, because it's not just the humanitarian fund that I administer or that comes through an area presidency. It's the work of the covenantal people of the church, whatever it is that we are doing. And it's all part of one great whole. And a lot of the work that I do has been turned over to area presidents. They're working in communities and they're working on the most pressing things. If you want to raise your voice to the area presidency on the issues that are most important to you so that they can in turn guide where the funding goes and where the projects go and the relationships, especially if you offer up relationships and your willingness to help, I think those are all really critical, important things that would be very welcome.
So there's a beautiful quote, and I should have looked it up before I came from President Eyring, and I think it's a talk he gave in 2005, or I don't know, 2009. It was a while ago, so the youngins on this call won't have ever heard it. But he talked about the fact that that Christ would come to a Zion people, right? Like essentially that we needed to sort of prepare for Christ coming in that way. And I've thought a lot about that. And so one of the questions I'd love to have you share with us, if you have a second, is how, and you've touched on it a little bit, but how do you believe that this work helps us prepare to be a Zion people that will know him when he comes?
When it comes down to the principles of Zion, and we all know what they are out of the Pearl of Great Price, that people are of one heart and of one mind, and there's no poor, and that they're unified with God. But how does that happen? There's really
Yeah.
two forces that are pushing everything else on the planet. The first one is I'm going to prosper according to the management of the creature. In other words, I'm going to get what I need at whatever expense. And it was so discouraging to me during the pandemic. I really went through a lot of difficult soul searching because that was so revealed so baldly, even in myself of, you know what, I need toilet paper. I'm going to get my toilet paper. I'm going to wipe it off the shelf, whatever, because I'm going to get what I need. That human competitive spirit just came out with so much vivid color, I guess is what that. So you've got that. And then the other side is just what Jesus said of every person seeking the interest of their neighbor. And when it comes down to it, those are the two forces.
Competing forces.
Every time we choose that I am going to seek the interest of my neighbor, even when it's against my own self-interest, I'm going to do what is inconvenient to me or what takes my energy in order to help somebody else thrive. I think that is laying paving stones for that Zion society. And every time we choose that and we project an example for other people to be able to say, oh, I can see the blessing in that. I don't know if there's time here, but I thought at the very end I would read this page that came out of Jimmy Carter. I was
Yeah.
a high school student when Jimmy Carter was the president, and so I remember this, and maybe most people don't, or we didn't pay enough attention. But when it became clear at the end of his presidency that because of the Iran hostage crisis and because of the wild inflation and the gas lines and everything that was happening, he wasn't going to get reelected. He wasn't going to get the second term that he really wanted. And when that happened, he had a televised speech that he was going to give and he canceled it. And then he went back to his advisors and he said, no, I want to give that national speech, but I'm going to talk about something different. I'm not going to talk about energy. And they're like, what are you going to talk about? You know, they wanted to shape it a little bit. And he said, I don't have anything to lose. So I'm going to tell them what I really think. And this was the speech that he gave. So I'm just going to read this. It comes out of on
Please.
180. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. And it's so fascinating that this was almost 50 years ago. It's a crisis of confidence. It's a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of our unity of purpose for our nation. We've always had a faith that the days of our children would be better than our own. Our people are losing that faith, not only in government itself, but in the ability as citizens to serve as the ultimate rulers and shapers of our democracy. These changes didn't happen overnight. They've come upon us gradually over the last generation, years that were filled with shocks and tragedies, and I think that that's so true. We were sure that ours was a nation of the ballot, not the bullet, until the murders of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. We were taught that our armies were always invincible and our causes were always just, only to suffer the agony of Vietnam. We respected the presidency as a place of honor until the shock of Watergate. These wounds are still very deep and they have never been healed. We know the strength of America. We are strong. We can regain our unity. We can regain our confidence. We are heirs of generations who survived threats much more powerful and awesome than those that challenge us now. We are at a turning point in our history. There are two paths to choose. One is a path I've warned about tonight, the path that leads to fragmentation and self-interest. Down that road lies a mistaken idea of freedom, the right to grasp for ourselves some advantage over others. All the traditions of our past, all the lessons of our heritage, all the promises of our future point to another path, the path of common purpose and the restoration of American values. In closing, let me say this. I will do my best, but I will not do it alone. Let your voice be heard. Whenever you have a chance, say something good about our country. With God's help and for the sake of our nation, it's time for us to join hands in America. We are all Americans together, and we must not forget that the common good is our common interest and our individual responsibility. And if I could give a pep talk to MWEG and the things that you're trying to do, it's just the simple choice between this. Will we choose fragmentation and isolation, or will we choose that the common good is our common interest and my individual responsibility? And it's instructive to me to watch what Carter did. He didn't ever run for office again. He didn't really get involved in politics very much, but he spent the rest of his post-presidential life working on that common good, eradicating diseases and building people's houses and striking peace plans with people. And I think we as women of covenant, we have a great foundation to do those same kinds of things. And part of it is to let our voice be heard. And that's partly why you're organized as MWEG. And I just think it's tremendous. I'm proud to be part of what we did tonight, and I hope to do more in the future.
Thank you, Sharon. I am weepy, so we just want to express our profound gratitude. I cannot imagine we planned this a few months ago and thought, okay, how do we start out what we think has the potential to be a difficult year for people? And we thought the voice we want in our head is Sharon Eubank. So we were not wrong. So thank you very much for being the voice. And we will, Sharon has asked that we make this recording available for you to share with friends and family, and we hope that you will do that. We hope that you will be willing to get these good words out there, because there is much to be, I think, hopeful about. And that I really do believe everything that she's taught us today, that each of us has the opportunity to do great things by doing small acts with great love. So thank you, Sharon. We really appreciate having you.